Welcome back to Business Ethics. My name is Tom, and today we are talking about the topic of what is business ethics. So we've already discussed, a general idea of what is ethics, right? The concern for the distinction between what's right and what's wrong, and kind of looking at the ideal of human conduct, right? In terms of what the right thing to do is, or the good thing to do. Um, and business ethics is a kind of applied ethics, and so in that sense, is concerned with what the right thing to do is in the business setting, right? But what is unique about business ethics is that it's not really just concerned about what the right thing for me or you or individuals to do in at the workplace or whatnot. It's really concerned with the question of what a business as a whole should do to contribute to kind of the greater good of society, right? In what sense and to what extent do businesses really have an obligation to be thinking about their impact to all kinds of facets of society, right? So do they really have an obligation to think about the environment? Do they really have an obligation to think about local communities? Um, this kind of stuff, right? This is what makes business ethics kind of unique. And the kind of main one key piece of terminology that we'll focus on quite a bit is the idea of a stakeholder, right? A stakeholder is anyone who has a stake in the success or failure of a business, right? So, this can be the community, it can be employees and investors, but it can also be the environment, and it can be the government, right? When we think about like bank failures or something like this, the government as a whole has an investment in the success of those banks will make sure that the fallout's not too bad. And so there are lots of different entities, individuals, special interest groups that can be concerned about a business or will be impacted by the success or failure of a business. And the kind of general catch-all term for that is stakeholder, right? And generally, one way to think about what an ethical business is one that considers stakeholders, right? And thinks about stakeholder interests when making decisions about a business, right? Where to set up a factory, how many people do employ, how much you pay them, all kinds of other things, right? Now, what we usually call a company that is kind of concerned with stakeholders in this way, has a kind of stakeholder orientation, is one that's a socially responsible company, right? And so the kind of main term, I think they mentioned towards the end of the reading for this module, is corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short, right? The kind of more contemporary term for that, or a newer version of it, is what's ESG, right? And that's environment, society, and governance, right? And I think they're talking about corporate governance there, right? That's another kind of acronym that people use. So CSR or ESG. I tend to use CSR more just because I think it makes a little more sense. So that's really the debate. That's what's unique about business ethics, right? This concern with CSR. And then you have a number of people who think that CSR really gets in the way of making good business decisions, right? You're kind of taking your eye off the ball of being profitable and competitive in the marketplace. And then there are some that think, no, companies really have an obligation to think about the impacts of their decisions, right? So that's kind of the main concern here. What's unique about the kind of the application of ethics in the business world, right? This idea of CSR, and the kind of two main positions that frame up the debate for this class are first what I call a profit first view. And a profit first view is very simply an orientation towards business that prioritizes profit over anything else, right? This is, the view that what a company or business should be doing is turning a profit, right? And that's a question of priority. It's not to say that businesses can't do some kind of philanthropic work, that they can't do anything to serve the greater good or concerned about or be concerned about stakeholders at all. It just means that their main concern, the thing that really guides the decisions they make, is a concern for profit, right? And then the alternative view to this is what I call a purpose first view of business. And a purpose first view of business is one that really sees a business as primarily providing some kind of good or service to society, right? You focus on that and you prioritize that role of providing that good or service, and everything else comes secondary to it, including profit, right? And so, if you are a shoemaker, if you have a shoemaking factory, then you're concerned with making good shoes that people are going to want, and having a well-running factory and that it has a safe workplace for everyone, that people get paid decent. And then the idea is that if you kind of do the right thing and fulfill your obligations there in terms of making a good product, then you will make money, right? And the profit comes secondary to this kind of placing your purpose first, right? And of course, a purpose first view is going to be much, much more friendly and give much more pride of place to social responsibilities, right? Because it really views a business as fulfilling a kind of social role, right? Really primarily facilitating kind of the greater good in some way. Right? And so these are the two main kind of camps, and we will talk about these throughout the semester, right? And the final paper will be really on this debate and taking a stance on this. Now, one more thing to kind of mention about this and the way this is kind of cast, the way I'm setting up this debate is a little bit different than the way it tends to get set up in business ethics textbooks. Usually, and in our book, to a certain extent, definitely, what a business ethics textbook will do is they open up and they talk about corporate social responsibility, and then they kind of give you the pitch, right? This is why you should be a socially responsible company, or why you should make socially responsible decisions in your company. And the pitch is usually phrased around the idea of longevity, sustainability, right? The idea is that, okay, yeah, being honest and making a good product and all that kind of stuff is not going to serve you short term, but long term it will, right? Because you're not kind of bogged down by scandals, you don't have a lot of legal troubles, you are making a good product that people will recognize, and so on and so forth, right? And I think there's a lot to that angle, right? But what we are going to do in this class is press on that, because I think there's a lot of counter examples to that, right? And also, as a side note, let me just mention that, when we're doing business ethics, I'm not going to assume that, taking on a purpose first view or kind of a position of CSR is the right position. I do think there's a debate about that, and the idea that maybe the realm of business is slightly different or unique than other activities that we engage in, right? And that we will talk about people think that there's like healthy competition, right? And that competition promotes innovation and this kind of stuff. And there's an argument there that we really need to consider, right? But also, when it comes to the profit first view, one other position that we really need to consider, or what would you say, examples that we need to consider, are counter examples to this kind of pitch of an ethical or socially responsible company, right? And very simply, there are lots of companies that are well known to not be socially responsible. And they are very sustainable and they are very profitable and they have a lot of longevity, right? And they go through these scandals and they have a bad reputation and they continue to do very, very well, right? Couple off the top of my head, Wells Fargo, right? Been in the news over the last few years for a number of scandals, right? They are very profitable. And they are very sustainable. They've been around for like over 100 years. They don't seem to be going anywhere. They're one of the biggest banks in the United States. I think 1 in 3 households has some kind of line of credit with Wells Fargo. And so the question is, well, they're kind of known to not be socially responsible. How does that work, right? Um, Another example is Purdue Pharma, right? They went through a major lawsuit around their kind of false advertising and lying about OxyContin being addictive. They claimed it wasn't, right? And they ended up having a payout of something like $6 billion. They still make OxyContin and they still profit off it, right? They paid that settlement and they just keep going, right? So and they've been around for decades, right? Another example, not too long ago, there were gas hikes, right? And gas prices went up. They were around almost $5 a gallon in Denver metro area. And during that time, BP and Shell made record-breaking profits, right? They had fantastic quarters, and they were profiting off of all our misery, right? When you have this kind of high inflation, a lot of companies will just kind of double their profit margins, right? They'll hike their rates even higher, right? Because people won't notice, right? If you're paying 4.50 for a gallon of gas or you're paying 4.90, people are going to be mad either way, and so they don't really pay attention too much. And lots of companies do this. This is how they deal with inflation, right? They don't actually suffer through inflation; they pass it to their consumers. And so, a lot of major oil distributors were making tons of money at this time, and they're doing just fine, right? There's no concern. People aren't protesting them. People aren't concerned. Investors are not pulling out. So those are 3 examples off the top of my head of companies that have reputations for being socially irresponsible and still have done well. And so the question is, well, how does this kind of measure up against the pitch for CSR, right? And I'm not arguing for a profit first orientation. I'm just saying that there's a lot to be said here. And this is the debate, and just opening up this debate. And this is, we're gonna have to look at different facets and different angles to business, and break down what ethics are, some different ethical theories. We're gonna have to look at capitalism and how capitalism functions, and then we'll kind of circle back to some more kind of detailed angles to business. So that's it for today. Thank you very much, and we will talk again soon.